I'm Jessica Carter, 35, and let me tell you, nothing hits you harder than walking in to see your little girl scrubbing the kitchen floor all by herself, down on her knees. My job in advertising keeps me on the road more than I'd like, but getting home early that afternoon turned our whole world upside down. My darling Sophie, just 7 years old, was shaking like a leaf when I stepped through the door. My husband's folks never really took to Sophie after I tied the knot with David. They'd whisked their real granddaughter off to a theme park instead, leaving Sophie behind. What happened after that moment would change our family's story forever. So where are you folks tuning in from? Share your city in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and stick with me as I tell you how I stood up for my daughter when no one else did. I've always been a go-getter, climbing the ladder in online advertising while balancing mom duties. But don't get it twisted. Sophie's my everything, my heart living outside my chest. Some days juggling it all feels like a losing battle, but we make it work. I met David Thompson 7 years back at a neighbour's cookout. Sophie was only 3, a little bundle of curls who charmed everyone, especially David. From the get-go, he'd plop down on the carpet to play with her, do goofy voices for bedtime stories, and never once acted like she wasn't his own flesh and blood. Sophie came to me through heartbreak. My cousin Emily, my closest friend since we were kids, passed away with her husband in a terrible car crash. Their daughter Sophie had no one left, so at 27, single and scared out of my mind, I stepped up. Adopting her was a roller coaster of emotions, but it was the right thing to do. Sophie deserved a steady home and all the love I could give, and I vowed to provide that forever. When David popped the question a year after we met, he made Sophie part of it in the sweetest way. He got down on one knee, holding a ring for me and a tiny star pendant for Sophie, asking if we'd both make him the luckiest guy by being his family. After we said "I do," David adopted Sophie legally too. In our hearts and on paper we were a tight-knit trio. That's when I met David's parents, William and Margaret Thompson. At first they seemed friendly enough, though a bit standoffish. They brought Sophie little presents, but their hugs felt stiff, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. I figured they just needed time to get used to our ready-made family. "She's a cute little thing," Margaret said once, eyeing Sophie's features closely. "Doesn't really take after you or David, does she?" Her words strung, but David jumped in, calmly explaining that Sophie was adopted, no shame or hesitation in his voice. Then there was Daniel, David's younger brother, and his daughter Ava, who was 7 too, born just a month before Sophie. The cousins hit it off at first, giggling and playing at family get-togethers while the grown-ups chatted. But I started noticing little things at these gatherings. The grandparents would bring gifts for both girls, but Ava was always fancier or pricier. They'd snap photos with both, but only Ava made it to their social media. When Sophie spoke, Margaret sometimes acted like she didn't hear, but she'd hang on Ava's every word. David saw it too. After one Christmas where Ava got a smartwatch and Sophie got a puzzle set, he pulled his parents aside. "Sophie's my daughter," he said firmly. "I need you to show her the same love you give Ava." They brushed it off, saying we were overreacting. "We adore both girls the same," William insisted. "Sophie just seems to like simpler things," but the differences kept piling up. At Easter, they'd hide extra eggs for Ava. At Thanksgiving, they'd ask Ava about her classes but skip over Sophie. They were small slights, maybe, but they added up, chipping away at Sophie's sense of belonging. "Why does Grandma Margaret bake cookies with me like she does with Ava?" Sophie asked me once, her voice so quiet it broke my heart. I didn't have a good answer, so I started our own special traditions to make up for it. David was amazing, always reassuring Sophie while trying to keep the peace with his family. "They're old school," he'd say. "They'll come around." I wasn't so convinced, but I respected his hope in his parents. That's why my recent work trip got so tricky. I'd been dodging a Seattle conference for ages, but when my boss said this client meeting was a must, I finally gave in. David promised he'd handle everything with Sophie: school runs, ballet practice, homework, the whole deal. "We've got this, hun," he said, kissing my forehead as I stressed over my suitcase. "Sophie and I will have a daddy-daughter weekend. Maybe we'll build that bird feeder we've been planning." Sophie was excited for some special time with David too, so it all seemed set. Until 2 days before I left, David got a frantic call from his company's Denver office. A big client was about to jump ship, and as the lead account manager, he had to go. We scrambled for childcare options. Our usual sitter was off at college and our backup was booked. David suggested his parents. "They've been wanting more time with Sophie," he said. "This could help them bond." I wasn't thrilled, thinking back to all those little moments of favoritism. "I don't know, David. Maybe my mom could come up from Nevada." "With her hip surgery and last-minute flights," he pointed out. "My parents aren't perfect, but they can handle this. It's just 3 days and I'll be back before you." I agreed, though I wasn't happy about it. We were out of options, and I hoped maybe some alone time with Sophie could change things for the better. The morning I left, William and Margaret showed up at our place with their bags. "We've got it all covered," Margaret said, barely looking up from her phone. "We raised 2 boys, you know. 1 little girl will be easy." I knelt down to Sophie's level. "Sweetie, be good for Grandma and Grandpa, all right?" I said, brushing a curl from Sophie's face. "I'll call you every night and Daddy'll be home in a couple of days." Sophie gave a brave little nod, but I could see the flicker of worry in her big eyes. "I'll be fine, Mommy," she said softly. "I'll help with stuff around the house, don't worry." "You don't need to fuss with chores, honey," I told her, wrapping her in a tight hug. "Just enjoy being a kid, okay? I love you more than all the fireflies in a summer sky." "Love you to the stars and back," she murmured, our special goodbye that always warmed my heart. My Seattle meetings kept me swamped, but I carved out time each evening to video chat with Sophie. The first night she seemed okay, though quieter than usual. She told me they'd eaten mac and cheese and watched a cartoon afterward. "You having a good time with Grandma and Grandpa?" I asked, hopping for a smile. She shrugged, her little shoulders barely moving. "It's fine, I guess. Grandma made me tidy my toys 3 times. She said I'm too sloppy." I furrowed my brow. Sophie's always been neat as a pin for a 7-year-old. "Well, sweetie, just follow their rules while you're there. Only 2 more days, okay?" The next night our call was cut short. William picked up instead of Sophie, saying she was still eating dinner and would call me back, but that call never happened. When I tried again before bed, Margaret answered, sounding annoyed. "Sophie's already tucked in," she snapped. "She was exhausted from running around all day. We'll have her call tomorrow." Something felt off, like a puzzle piece missing, but I couldn't quite place it. Later, David called to say his Denver meetings were dragging on longer than planned. "My folks are fine staying an extra day," he assured me. "I'll be back the day after tomorrow and you'll be home right after that." On the 3rd day, something unexpected happened. The client we'd been pitching signed the deal early, freeing up the last 2 days of my trip. "Why not stay and explore Seattle?" my coworker suggested. "It's gorgeous this time of year." But all I could think about was getting back to Sophie. Those short, uneasy calls with my in-laws had left a knot in my stomach. I booked the earliest flight home, deciding to keep it a surprise. I figured Sophie would be thrilled, and it'd give William and Margaret a break sooner than expected, a win all around. On the plane, my nerves started buzzing, a restless urge to be home already. At the airport, I called the house, but no one picked up. I shot David a text to let him know I was coming home early. "That's awesome," he replied. "Still stuck in Denver, client drama's worse than we thought. Love you and Sophie." Driving home from the airport, a mix of excitement and a strange unease churned in my chest. I brushed it off as jet lag and mom guilt for being away. I couldn't wait to see Sophie's face light up when I walked in, picturing her squealing, running for a hug, and spilling all her stories in one breath. But as I turned into our street, something felt wrong. William and Margaret's car wasn't in the driveway. It was a Thursday afternoon. Where could they be with Sophie? Maybe the zoo or an ice cream run. Still, my gut twisted. I parked, grabbed my suitcase, and stepped into the crisp spring air, heading to the front door. The house was eerily still as I walked in. "Sophie, anybody home?" I called, dropping my bags by the door. The silence sent a shiver through me. I wandered through the house, calling Sophie's name louder each time. The living room was empty, but I spotted her favourite stuffed bear teddy paws tossed on the floor, odd since she never went anywhere without it. In the dining room, I saw crumbs scattered on the table and a half-drunk glass of juice, like lunch had been rushed. "Sophie," I called again, my voice bouncing off the walls. Then a faint sound came from the kitchen, a soft sniffle followed by a scrubbing noise. My heart raced as I hurried toward it. Nothing could have braced me for what I saw. There was Sophie, down on her knees on the chilly tile floor, clutching a big scrub brush in her tiny hands, working hard at the white tiles. A bucket of soapy water sat next to her. Her cheeks were streaked with dried tears, her curls matted with sweat, and she was still in the same outfit from our video call last night. She was so focused on one spot that she didn't see me at first. I froze in the doorway, my mind struggling to make sense of it. "Sophie," I finally whispered, my voice barely audible. She jumped, the brush clattering to the floor as she spun around. For a moment, fear flashed in her eyes, a look I'd never seen her give me before she realized it was me. "Mommy," her voice was so small, like she wasn't sure I was really there. I crossed the kitchen in a few steps and dropped to my knees beside her, not caring that my work pants soaked up the soapy water. "Honey, what's going on? Where are Grandma and Grandpa?" Sophie's lip quivered as fresh tears spilled over. "I'm sorry, Mommy, I spilled apple juice this morning and made a mess. Grandma said I had to learn to be responsible, so I've got to clean the whole floor before they're back." My blood turned to ice. The entire floor. "Sophie, where'd they go?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked down, her shoulders sagging. "They took Ava to Funland, the big theme park with the giant slides. They left you here by yourself." I fought to keep my tone calm, though anger was bubbling inside. Sophie nodded. "Grandma said I couldn't go 'cause I wouldn't enjoy it like Ava does. She said Ava gets special days because she's their real granddaughter." Her voice cracked and my heart broke into a million pieces. I pulled her close, feeling her tremble in my arms. "How long have you been alone, sweetie?" "Since after breakfast," she whispered into my shoulder. "Grandma said they'd be back by dinner and the floor better be perfect or I wouldn't get any ice cream. She said I need to think about why I'm always so clumsy." For hours, my little girl had been alone, scrubbing and crying. My 7-year-old daughter had been left alone for hours, scrubbing the kitchen floor on her hands and knees while her grandparents took their real granddaughter to a theme park. My stomach churned like I'd been punched. "Has this happened before, Sophie? Them leaving you by yourself?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Yesterday they took Ava shopping at the mall. They said I couldn't come because I was too fussy and would slow them down." Her voice trembled. "They were gone for ages and I got scared." I shut my eyes, swallowing the fury and guilt threatening to spill over. "Sweetie, what else happened while I was away?" I said gently. "You can tell me anything, I promise I won't be upset with you." Sophie's story came out in bits and pieces, like a puzzle I wished I didn't have to piece together. She told me how Ava got shiny new toys while she had to watch, how she was stuck doing chores, washing dishes, dusting shelves, picking up, while Ava played without a care. Margaret had made snide remarks about Sophie not being true family or having Thompson blood. Grandma said I should be thankful you and Daddy took me in because no one else wanted me, Sophie said, her tone so flat it broke my heart, like she believed it. She said I'm lucky I didn't end up in a foster home. Every word cut deeper than the last. I pulled Sophie closer, rocking her softly. Listen to me, Sophie Marie Carter Thompson, I said firmly. You're not lucky we took you in, we're the lucky ones. Every morning I thank the heavens I get to be your mom. You're the most precious person in my world, and I'm so sorry this happened. Are you mad I spilled the juice? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Not a bit, honey, I said, smoothing her damp curls. Spills happen to everyone. Nobody should make you scrub a whole floor for it, and they had no right to leave you alone. That was their mistake, not yours. I helped Sophie stand, noticing how drained she looked. Her knees were red and sore from the hard tiles, and her little hands were wrinkled and raw from the soapy water. Come on, let's get you cleaned up and grab some ice cream, I said, guiding her to the bathroom with a determined smile. As I washed her hands and face, my mind raced with anger and next steps. Will Grandma be mad at me when they get back? Sophie asked while I dabbed lotion on her chapped skin. No way, sweetheart, I said firmly. You're not in trouble with anyone, but Grandma and Grandpa have some serious explaining to do with me. Her eyes widened. Are you gonna yell at them? I took a deep breath, thinking it over. No yelling, but I'm going to make sure this never happens again. Nobody treats my daughter like this, nobody. After cleaning her up, I took Sophie to her favorite ice cream shop in town. As she dug into a strawberry swirl cone, I watched her closely, picking up on things I'd missed in my initial shock. She looked thinner after just a few days, with faint shadows under her eyes. Her usual bubbly chatter was quieter, and she kept glancing at me like she needed to make sure I was still there. Sophie, I need you to tell me everything that happened while I was gone, I said softly. All 3 days, even the stuff you think might upset me. It's really important. Between licks of her cone, Sophie opened up and the picture was worse than I'd imagined. The first day wasn't great but bearable. By the second day, the unfair treatment was undeniable. Ava got to watch cartoons while Sophie had to sit quietly with a book. When both girls got rowdy during a game, only Sophie got scolded for being wild. Grandma said Ava knows how to behave like a proper girl because she comes from good stock, Sophie said, clearly confused by the term. What good stock, Mommy? Like animals, I swallowed hard. It's an old, wrong way to talk about families. Grandma shouldn't have said that. Then I learned Sophie had been given plain, unwanted food while Ava got her favorite meals. When Sophie asked for the same pizza Ava had, Margaret told her, that's special for Ava, you can have toast. The Funland trip wasn't the only time Sophie was left out. The day before, they'd taken Ava to a puppet show, leaving Sophie at home with orders to think about her attitude. What attitude? I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the fire in my chest. Sophie shrugged. Grandma said I was rude for asking if I could have a cookie like Ava did. She got a cookie, but I didn't. Was that wrong to ask? No, honey, that was perfectly fine, I reassured her. By the time we finished our ice cream, I'd made up my mind. This wasn't just a one-off mistake. It was a pattern of neglect and emotional cruelty aimed at my daughter, and it was stopping now. In the car, I tried calling David, but it went to voicemail. I sent a text, call me now, emergency with your parents and Sophie. Back home, I ran Sophie a warm bubble bath, her favorite, and let her splash while I paced the hallway, clutching my phone. When David finally called back, his voice was tight with worry. What's going on? Is Sophie okay? I slipped into our bedroom, shutting the door, and let it all pour out, finding Sophie alone, scrubbing the floor, the Funland trip, everything. David's shock turned to fury fast. They left her alone for hours, he said, his voice rising, and they told her she's not real family. Yes, I said quietly, keeping my voice low so Sophie wouldn't hear. David, this isn't just favoritism, it's emotional abuse, and leaving a 7-year-old alone for hours, that's neglect, maybe even illegal. There was a long pause on his end. I'm coming home, he said finally. I'll grab the next flight out. What about your client? I asked. Forget the client, he said, his tone fierce in a way I rarely heard. My daughter comes first. The word daughter, not stepdaughter, not your daughter, just daughter, lit a spark of warmth in my chest, even through the storm of anger and hurt. David, I said, keeping my voice steady, we need to figure out how to handle this before they walk back in. They'll be here for dinner soon, and I'm not letting them act like everything's fine. I want them out of our house, David said without hesitation, and I don't want them alone with Sophie ever again. I'm with you, I replied, relieved we were on the same wavelength. But we've got to be smart about this. I don't want Sophie or Ava caught in the middle of a big blow-up. The girls shouldn't see us fighting with their grandparents. We tossed around ideas and landed on a plan. David would try to catch the earliest flight home from Denver, but until then, I'd handle his parents with a cool head and a firm hand. They'd be told to pack up and leave, either to a hotel or back to their place. We'd make it crystal clear that they'd never have unsupervised time with Sophie again. They're gonna push back, David warned. They'll say we're making a mountain out of a molehill, that leaving her alone was no big deal, just teaching her a lesson. Let them try, I said, a new edge in my voice. They left our daughter alone for hours after making her feel like she's nothing. There's no excuse for that. After we hung up, I checked on Sophie, who was splashing happily with her bath toys, looking a bit more like her old self. I sat by the tub helping her rinse her hair, but my heart sank when I spotted a faint bruise on her arm. Sweetie, where'd this come from? I asked, keeping my tone light. Oh, Sophie said, barely glancing at it. Grandma grabbed me there yesterday when I knocked over a glass. It was my fault, though I was being clumsy. I took a slow breath, keeping calm for her sake. That's not clumsiness, honey, that's just being a kid, and grown-ups should never grab you hard enough to leave marks no matter what. After her bath, I slipped Sophie into her coziest pajamas, even though it was barely evening. She needed comfort more than proper dinner clothes. We snuggled on the couch, watching her favorite cartoon, and I explained what was coming in a way she'd understand. Grandma and Grandpa made some really bad choices, I told her. Choices that mean they can't be trusted to look after you anymore, so they won't be staying here. Sophie's eyes got big. Are they in trouble? Yep, big trouble, I said honestly. What they did was wrong and there are consequences for that. Will I still see Ava? She asked, her voice tiny. My heart twisted. She was worried about her cousin despite everything. Of course, sweetie. Ava didn't do anything wrong and neither did you. This is about the grown-ups, not you two. As the afternoon dragged on, I kept glancing at the clock. It was nearing 5:30 p.m., our usual dinner time. William and Margaret would be back with Ava any minute and I had to be ready. I asked Sophie to play in her room when they arrived, promising I'd call her down soon. You're not mad at me, right, Mommy? She asked, clutching Teddy paws tightly. Not for a second, I said, kissing her forehead. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. As I shut Sophie's door, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I straightened up, took a deep breath and headed downstairs to face them. One thing was for sure, no one would ever make my daughter feel unwanted in her own home again. The front door burst open with cheerful chatter. Margaret came in first, carrying bags with Funland's bright logo. William followed, with a sleepy Ava perched on his shoulders. They didn't see me standing by the living room doorway until I cleared my throat. Margaret jumped, hand on her chest. Jessica, goodness, you startled me. What are you doing back so soon? Where's Sophie? William asked, setting Ava down and glancing around. Sophie's upstairs, I said, keeping my voice even despite the anger simmering inside. She's resting after scrubbing the kitchen floor for 4 hours alone in an empty house. Margaret's face flickered, maybe guilt, maybe just irritation at being called out, before she settled into a scowl. Oh, don't make a fuss. She spilled juice and had to clean it up. It's called learning responsibility. Responsibility, I echoed, struggling to keep my tone calm. You think leaving a 7-year-old alone for hours while you take Ava to Funland is teaching responsibility? William stepped in, setting down his bags. Now, Jessica, it wasn't like that. Sophie was acting up this morning, crying over the juice. She needed some time to think about her behavior. Crying, I said. Sophie told me she spilled juice by accident and said sorry right away. Well, she would say that, Margaret sniffed, shrugging off her coat. I've noticed she bends the truth to get her way, not like our Ava. Her casual cruelty made my blood boil, but I held it together. Whatever happened with the juice, you left a 7-year-old alone. Do you know that's considered neglect under state law? I could call child services right now. That hit a nerve. William's face paled and Margaret's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't dare, she hissed. We were only gone a few hours and Sophie's fine. Stop being so dramatic. I'm not dramatic, I said. I'm a mom who found her daughter alone, scared, scrubbing floors and hearing she's not a real part of this family. William shifted, looking uneasy. We never said that. Oh, really? Because Sophie told me you've said over and over that she doesn't have Thompson blood and should be grateful we took her in like no one else wanted her. Margaret rolled her eyes. Kids exaggerate, and it's just a fact she's not blood-related. We're just being honest. She's 7 years old, I said, my voice rising despite myself. And she is family. David adopted her legally. She carries your last name. What more do you need? William raised a hand, trying to calm things. Look, we might have messed up today, but you're blowing this out of proportion. We've been watching Sophie all week without a hitch. No hitch, I laughed, incredulous. Sophie told me everything. How you left her out of outings, made her do chores while Ava played, gave Ava better food and toys, grabbed her hard enough to bruise her, told her she whines too much, left her alone yesterday too. This isn't a one-time slip, it's a pattern. Just then my phone rang. It was David. I answered and put it on speaker. David, Margaret said, her voice suddenly syrupy. Your wife's throwing around wild accusations. We've been taking great care of Sophie, but you know how difficult she can be. We had to discipline her today for acting out. Discipline, David's voice crackled through, sharp with barely contained rage. By leaving her alone for hours while you took Ava to Funland. She needed to learn a lesson, William said, and we wanted to treat Ava to a special day. What's wrong with that? What's wrong, David said, his words slow and deliberate, is that you abandoned my daughter. You neglected her. You made her feel like she doesn't belong in her own family. Oh, come on, Margaret scoffed, rolling her eyes. Sophie's just being overly sensitive, just like her mom. Honestly, David, what did you expect? Family ties run deep, and it's only natural we're closer to Ava. The room fell so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Even Margaret seemed to realize she'd crossed a line. What did you just say? David's voice came through the phone, low and sharp like a blade. Margaret faltered, then tried to backtrack. I only meant, but David cut her off cold. I heard you loud and clear, Mom, and it's not okay. Sophie is my daughter, full stop. Not my stepdaughter, not my adopted daughter, my daughter. If you can't show her the same love and respect you give Ava, you don't belong in her life. Margaret's face twisted with outrage. How dare you talk to me like that? After all we've done for you, we're your parents. And I'm Sophie's parent, David shot back, unwavering. My job is to keep her safe, even from you. I stepped in then, keeping my voice steady but firm as steel. Here's the deal. You're packing your bags and leaving our house tonight. Head to a hotel or drive back to your place, I don't care, but you're not staying here and you're done having unsupervised time with Sophie. This is outrageous, Margaret stammered. William, say something. William looked caught, his eyes darting between his wife and the phone. David, let's all take a breath and talk this through calmly. We messed up today, but cutting us off from our granddaughter seems extreme. It's not just today, I said, my voice sharp. It's every snide comment, every comparison, every time you've made Sophie feel like she's less than Ava. She actually believes she deserves to be treated worse because she's not a real Thompson. And that ends now, David added from the phone. I'm boarding a flight in an hour. When I get home, I expect you gone. We'll talk about supervised visits later after Sophie's had time to recover. Ava, who'd been silent this whole time, piped up suddenly. Is Sophie okay? Can I see her? Her small, worried voice underscored how absurd this all was. Even a 7-year-old could see something was wrong. I knelt down to her level. Sophie's fine, sweetie, just resting. This isn't about you, Ava. You didn't do anything wrong. Margaret jumped on that, her voice climbing to a dramatic pitch. See what you're doing. You're tearing the cousins apart. You're ruining this family. No, I said, standing tall. You did that when you decided one granddaughter was worth more than the other. This is nonsense, Margaret snapped, snatching her purse. Come on, William, we don't have to stand here and take this. Where's Sophie? William asked again, his tone softer, almost worried. Can we at least say goodbye? I shook my head. Not tonight, she's been through enough, she'll call you when she's ready. Margaret huffed loudly. Fine, but this isn't over. We'll talk to David without you stirring the pot, Jessica. Go right ahead, I said coolly. But David's heard every word tonight, and he's standing with me and Sophie 100%. As they grabbed their things, Margaret spun around for one last jab. You know, Jessica, we always thought David could have done better. Now we're sure of it. Her words were meant to sting, but I just smiled. Funny, I was just thinking the same about Sophie's grandparents. They stormed out, doors slamming, tires squealing, dragging a confused Ava with them. As their car's noise faded, I leaned against the wall, drained. The showdown had gone as well as it could, but I knew this was just the start of a messy family fracture. I trudged upstairs to Sophie's room, where she sat on her bed, clutching teddy paws, clearly having caught some of the noise below. Did Grandma and Grandpa leave because of me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I sat beside her, pulling her close. No, honey, they left because of their own bad decisions. None of this is on you. Will they come back? She asked. I chose my words carefully. Not to stay with us, no. But maybe one day, if they learn to treat everyone in our family with kindness, we might see them for short visits. Sophie nodded, seeming to take it in. Is Daddy coming home? Yep, he'll be here in a few hours, I said. He can't wait to wrap you up in a big hug. As Sophie drifted off to sleep that night, hugging Teddy paws tightly, I sat by her bed watching her peaceful little face. I'd always sworn to keep her safe, and today I'd held true to that vow. There'd be consequences, tough talks, probably more arguments, but seeing Sophie rest without that tense, scared look told me I'd done right by her. Some family bonds, I realized, aren't worth holding onto if they hurt the ones we love most. David got home just past midnight, worn out from his trip but buzzing with energy. I met him at the door, falling into his arms, finally letting the tears come now that Sophie was asleep and I didn't have to be the strong one. I can't believe they did this, David murmured, his voice thick with hurt. My own parents, how could they treat her like that? We sat at the kitchen table, the same floor Sophie had been forced to scrub now spotless beneath us. I laid out every detail, Sophie's exact words, the state she was in when I found her, the awful treatment she'd endured over those few days. David listened, his expression growing more pained with every word. I knew they favored Ava, he said, raking his fingers through his hair. But this, leaving her alone, telling her she's not real family, I can't even wrap my head around it. Have they tried calling you? I asked. He nodded, his face grim. A bunch of times. I texted them I'd talk tomorrow, I couldn't deal with it tonight. The next morning, Sophie lit up when she saw David, launching into his arms with a joyful squeal that warmed my heart, a spark of her usual brightness coming back. Over breakfast, we held a family meeting, keeping it simple but honest for her age. Grandma and Grandpa made some really wrong choices, David said, holding Sophie's hand gently. When grown-ups make mistakes that hurt kids, there have to be consequences. Like when I get a timeout, Sophie asked. Kind of, I said, but their timeout is longer and they won't be able to spend time with you unless another grown-up we trust is there. Sophie thought about it. Are they mad at me? Not at all, sweetie, David said firmly. They might be upset about what's happening, but none of this is your fault. I need you to really believe that, okay? She nodded, though I could tell she wasn't fully convinced. We decided family therapy was the next step, for Sophie to work through what happened and for us to learn how to support her best. Later, while Sophie watched a cartoon, David called his parents with me sitting close as he put the call on speaker. We've been worried sick, Margaret said right away, after you and Jessica kicked us out last night. Mom, David cut in, his voice steady, I'm calling to make our stance crystal clear. What you and Dad did was neglect and emotional abuse. You left Sophie alone for hours, treated her as less than Ava, and made her feel like she doesn't belong in her own family. That's not okay, and it's not happening again. David, you're making this bigger than it is, William jumped in. Yes, we shouldn't have left her alone, we get that, but calling it abuse is over the top. Is it? David pushed back. You told my daughter she's not really family, that she should be grateful we took her in. Do you know what that does to a 7-year-old? We were just being truthful, Margaret said defensively. She's old enough to know the difference between biological and adopted family. There's no difference. David snapped, his calm breaking. Not in love, not in commitment, not in how she deserves to be treated. Sophie's my daughter in every way that counts. The call went downhill from there, with Margaret and William downplaying their actions, shifting blame and threatening to rally the extended family if we kept overreacting. David ended it by restating our terms. No unsupervised contact with Sophie, and any future visits would be short and watched closely. Sure enough, Margaret and William stirred up the family. David's aunts, uncles, and cousins started calling, most buying the watered-down story from his parents. They just wanted to treat Ava to a special day, one aunt said. Sophie was being difficult, claimed a cousin who'd never even met her. The pressure was heavy, but we held our ground. A few relatives, like David's brother Daniel, weren't so quick to believe the narrative. Daniel called a week later. Ava been upset, he said. She keeps asking about Sophie and why everyone's arguing. What really happened, David? David laid it all out, no sugarcoating. There was a long pause when he finished. God, Daniel said finally. Mom left her alone for hours and said she's not real family. Yeah, David confirmed. And there's more we haven't even gotten into. Another pause. I believe you, Daniel said. Ava mentioned Sophie had to clean while she got to play. I didn't think much of it then, but I'm so sorry. Is Sophie okay? That call was a turning point. Daniel became an unexpected supporter, pushing back against his parents' story and setting the record straight with the family. He even set up video chats for Ava and Sophie to keep their cousin bond strong despite the mess. Meanwhile, we poured our energy into Sophie's healing. We found a family therapist, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who specialized in adoption and blended families. She was kind but straightforward, giving Sophie a safe space to share what she'd kept inside. Sophie, how did it feel when Grandma said you weren't real family? Dr. Mitchell asked in one session. Sophie hugged Teddy paws tighter. Sad and scared, like maybe Daddy might stop loving me someday too. David's eyes welled up. Never, he said, his voice fierce and soft all at once. Not in a million years, kiddo. In the weeks that followed, we learned that what I'd walked in on was just the worst of a long string of slights Sophie had endured, making her believe she deserved less because she wasn't a true Thompson. Kids are incredibly adaptable, Dr. Sarah Mitchell told us in a session just for David and me. When they're treated differently, they often think it's their fault, something wrong with them, instead of seeing it as adults failing to do right by them. The first family event after that awful day was Sophie's school spring recital. We knew William and Margaret would show up since Ava was performing too. We prepped Sophie gently, promising we'd stick close the whole time. "What if Grandma tries to talk to me alone?" she asked, her voice shaky as we got ready. "That's not happening, sweetie," I assured her. "Daddy or I will be right there, and if anyone says anything that feels off, you tell us right away." The air in the elementary school auditorium felt thick with tension when we arrived. William and Margaret stood with Daniel and his wife, Ava between them in her sparkly recital dress. They spotted us right away. Margaret's face stiffened, and William looked down at his shoes. We steered Sophie to her classroom, taking a route that kept us clear of them. After dropping her off with her teacher, we found seats on the opposite side of the auditorium. Daniel made a point to come over and say hi. "How, Sophie holding up?" he asked, his concern genuine. "She's doing better," David said. "Therapy's helping." "How, Ava?" "Confused but okay," Daniel replied. "She misses Sophie." He paused, then added, "Mom and Dad are still, but I get why you took a stand. I'd have done the same for Ava." His words meant more than he could have guessed. After the recital, we couldn't dodge William and Margaret completely. They approached as we waited for Sophie outside her classroom. "She performed beautifully," William said, his tone awkward. "She sure did," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Margaret stayed silent, her lips tight as she watched Sophie come out, her confidence from the stage fading as she pressed against my side. "Hey, Sophie," William said, leaning down a bit. "You did an amazing job up there." "Thanks," Sophie mumbled, eyes on the floor. Margaret finally spoke, her voice sharp. "Well, I guess we should congratulate you, Jessica, for turning our granddaughter against us so completely." "Mom," David warned, his tone low. "Not here, not now." "Then when?" she snapped. "You've cut us off entirely over one mistake." "It wasn't one mistake," I said, calm but firm, "and this isn't the place to hash it out." We left soon after, with Sophie quiet in the back seat. "You okay, honey?" I asked, glancing back. She nodded slowly. "Grandma still seems mad at me." "She's not mad at you," David said, catching her eyes in the rearview mirror. "She's upset about grown-up stuff you don't need to worry about." As weeks turned to months, we stuck to our boundaries, allowing brief supervised visits, a dinner at a restaurant, an hour at the park with everyone there. These moments were often strained, especially with Margaret, who bristled at the new rules. "This is absurd," she grumbled at one gathering. "I can't even talk to Sophie without you looming over us." "That's right," I said evenly. "These are the rules we've set. You can follow them or not see Sophie at all, your call." William, at least, seemed to try. He brought Sophie thoughtful gifts, asked about her hobbies, and avoided comparing her to Ava. Whether it was real change or just playing nice under our watch, I couldn't tell, but it was something. The biggest surprise was how close Sophie and Ava became. Without the cloud of favoritism, their cousin bond grew stronger. They had video chats, supervised playdates, and real fun together, showing the issue was never about them. "I wish I could sleep over at Ava," Sophie said one day about 4 months later. "Not right now," I said gently, "but maybe one day if things keep getting better." "Because of what Grandma and Grandpa did?" she asked. "Yeah," I said honestly. "We have to make sure you're always safe and treated right. That's our job as your parents." Sophie thought for a moment, then said something that showed her growth. "It's not because I'm not a real Thompson, right? It's because they were being unkind." "Exactly," David said, his voice full of pride. "Being a Thompson isn't about blood or DNA. It's about love, respect, and treating each other well." 6 months after that horrible day, therapy revealed even more subtle slights and manipulations Sophie had faced, small moments that added up to make her feel less than. "The good news," Dr. Mitchell said, "is that Sophie's young and resilient. With your steady love and support, she's healing. You're helping her brain learn she's worthy, loved, and equal." David and I threw ourselves into that healing work, starting new family traditions that celebrated our unique story. We read books about adoption, talked openly about all kinds of families, and made sure Sophie knew her story was rooted in love, not loss. Bit by bit, we saw our daughter step out from the shadow of doubt. Her eyes sparkled again, her giggles came easier, and she didn't need constant reassurance. She was finding her way back, and so were we. 6 months after that terrible day, our family had carved out a new kind of normal. Sophie was thriving in therapy, David and I had solidified our partnership as parents, and our relationship with his parents had settled into something carefully manageable, though not fully mended. The biggest surprise came during a supervised lunch at a neutral diner. Sophie and I stepped away to the restroom, and David took a quick work call, leaving William and Margaret alone for a moment. When we got back, Margaret was quieter than usual. She poked at her salad for a while before suddenly looking at Sophie. "I owe you an apology, Sophie," she said, her voice shaky. "What we did was wrong, really wrong. I shouldn't have left you alone, and I never should have said those hurtful things about you not being family." Sophie stared at her grandmother, clearly caught off guard by the admission. "It's okay," she said softly, a reflex to soothe grown-up feelings. "No, it's not okay," William chimed in gently. "Your grandma's right. We weren't fair to you, and there's no excuse for it. We're truly sorry, Sophie." I watched Sophie closely, ready to step in, but she seemed to be mulling over their words. "Why did you do it?" she asked, her question so direct only a child could ask it without hesitation. Margaret looked shaken, glancing at William before answering. "I think I was stuck on old ideas about what makes a family," she said. "I was wrong. Family isn't about blood, it's about love. And your daddy loves you so much, which makes you every bit a Thompson, just like Ava." It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't fully address the favoritism or emotional harm, but it was a start, and I could see it meant something to Sophie. "Can we be friends now?" Sophie asked cautiously. Margaret's eyes welled up. "I'd love that more than anything." That moment marked a shift, though the path ahead was still long and tricky. On Dr. Sarah Mitchell's advice, Margaret started therapy to unpack her deep-rooted beliefs about family and lineage. William, who'd always been quieter in the dynamic, began making real efforts to connect with Sophie, asking about her favorite books and games without comparing her to Ava. The bond between Sophie and Ava kept growing, free from the poison of favoritism. Ava even started sticking up for Sophie. "Grandma, you have to ask Sophie what she wants too, not just me," she'd say when Margaret slipped into old habits. That kind of pushback from her real granddaughter seemed to hit Margaret harder than anything David or I could say. David's trust in his parents was forever changed, replaced with careful watchfulness, but their consistent efforts gave him a sliver of hope for real healing. "I never thought I'd have to teach my own parents how to act," he admitted to me one night. "But that's what we're doing, showing them how to treat our daughter right." "You're breaking a cycle," I told him. "Your parents probably got these ideas from their parents. By holding firm, you're making sure Sophie doesn't carry that baggage forward." The extended family, who'd initially sided with William and Margaret, slowly started to see the truth. Daniel and his wife became our biggest supporters, often bridging the gap between the family's divided sides. "Mom told me she doesn't know why she treated Sophie like that," Daniel shared over lunch with David. "She said she didn't mean to favor Ava, but it just happened. I think she's really trying to figure it out now." Sophie's healing was our main focus. The scars from years of subtle and overt slights ran deep, but kids bounced back with the right love and care. "I used to think something was wrong with me," Sophie shared in a therapy session. "Like I wasn't good enough to be a real Thompson, but now I know that's not true. I'm a real Thompson and a real Carter. I have 2 families who love me." Her words brought tears to my eyes. After all she'd been through, my little girl was finding her strength. By the 1-year mark after that awful day, we'd found a new family rhythm. William and Margaret were allowed supervised visits, slowly getting longer as they respected our rules. Sophie felt safe around them again, though she stayed a bit cautious compared to other family members. The goal isn't to erase what happened, Dr. Mitchell reminded us in a session with the grandparents. It's to learn, grow, and build better relationships. Margaret nodded, her usual defensiveness gone. I never want Sophie to feel unwanted or less than again. I'm still learning, but I'm committed to doing better. For the first time, I believed her. We celebrated Sophie's 8th birthday with a big party, inviting both sides of the family. Watching her blow out her candles, surrounded by people who truly saw her for who she was, I thought back on the painful road that brought us here. Finding Sophie alone, scrubbing the floor while being told she wasn't real family, was one of the worst moments of my life. But the boundaries we set, the therapy we embraced, and the tough talks we had strengthened our family in ways I never could have imagined. Most importantly, Sophie knew without a doubt that she was loved, protected, and worth fighting for. No child should have to learn that through pain, but the lesson itself was priceless. As I watched her giggle with Ava, open a thoughtful gift from Margaret, and beam at David's goofy camera antics, I knew we'd made the right call. We refused to accept the unacceptable and stood up for our daughter when she needed us most. In doing so, we taught her the biggest lesson of all. Love isn't about blood or biology, it's about choice, commitment, and standing by each other. If you're listening to this and have ever felt pressured to tolerate unfair treatment of your child for the sake of family peace, I hope our story gives you strength. Standing up for your kid can be hard, messy, even heartbreaking, but it's always worth it. Have you ever had to draw tough lines with family to protect your children? How did you handle it? Share your stories in the comments below. If this resonated, please hit like and subscribe for more real-life tales about family, motherhood, and the sometimes rocky path to doing what's right. Thanks for listening. Remember, blood doesn't make a family, love does.